So good morning, good afternoon, depends on where you are here in this great nation. And this is our fifth installment of the webinar series. And my name is Todd. I'm the Director of Emergency Management for Titan HST and also the host of Titan HST's Business Continuity Today's podcast. And I'm going to be the moderator for the webinar today. And we're super excited about this whole webinar series, but for today's programming especially. And lastly, I want to let you know we will be doing answers and questions or questions and answers. I encourage everyone that has questions, please put them in the Q&A box so that we can get them in the queue and answered properly. If you have any questions, logistically speaking, if there's any problems in there, that's where you can put that in the chat area over there. So we're not really going to be monitoring the chat so much, but the question and answer area will be. So if you have questions, again, please use the Q&A box. So let's get into this. So I want to introduce the panel. We have some great guests here. So we're Robert Gummer. He's the director of NFL, GSOC, and intelligence operations. And Mr. Gummer's been in the intelligence community for over 23 years, starting as an Army intel officer for 8 years. He taught Army intelligence for nearly 4 years before working for the FBI. And during his tenure, his experience, including managing intelligence teams and supporting violent gangs and drug trafficking investigations, counterterrorism, and assessing the health and effectiveness of intelligence programs. His last position, he served as the Senior National Intelligence Officer of Science and Technology. In 2008, he went over to the NFL because who wouldn't? And to build the league's GSOC from scratch and creating intelligence apparatus for monitoring threats. So Rob, welcome. Next, we have Elena Carrington. She's a senior manager of facilities of intelligence of Major League Baseball. And Elena serves as security for MLB's Global Office of Facilities, ensures the safety and security for MLB employees, provides threat management and for mitigation. Prior to her role at the MLB, Elena managed the travel, security, and geopolitical intelligence portfolio for Square and for mobile payments company based in San Francisco. So I'm sure you've all used Square in the past. And she also spent several years with United Airlines and Overseas Security Advisory Council, an office with the United States Department of State. And Elena has a bachelor's degree from Fairfield University and a master's of intelligence affairs from American University. Elena, welcome. And Blake Paris, Vice President of Safety Xperience for Vivint Arena and Utah Jazz. So Blake is the Vice President of Safety and Experience for Smith Entertainment Group, owner of Vivint Arena and the NBA Utah Jazz, and has been in the security industry for more than 18 years. He's a Coast Guard veteran conducting security missions in the Arabian Gulf, and he has served security manager for many high-profile entertainment venues across the nation, including LA Live, Entertainment District, downtown Los Angeles, Director of Security at Barclays Center and NASA Coliseum, and was the youngest security director in the NBA and NHL. Wow, both of them, that's awesome. And he was security director for Mandalay Bay Resort Casino in Las Vegas and senior director of security at SoFi Stadium and Entertainment District at Hollywood Park, the largest NFL stadium in the country and the home of Los Angeles Rams and the San Diego Chargers. I mean, the LA Chargers. Welcome to all of you to the panel. And just real quick, I know I read your backgrounds and stuff like this, but I'd like to go around the horn here and start with Robert. Rob, what really got you into the idea of what you're doing today with security and intelligence, specifically in that route? What made you go to that field?
That's a very good question. I think it was something that was kind of presented to me when I was actively pursuing a career in the FBI. I didn't really understand the intelligence field or what it meant. So this is way back in the 90s where the Army and DOD was using it when it wasn't a widely known thing outside of that. I fell in love with the business. And I think what's cool about the intelligence field is it's applicable to literally everything. And it's the game always changes. There's new things to learn. There's new things to apply to trade and art to. It's just a dynamic field that never stops, a place that didn't happen.
Yeah, it is a dynamic field for sure. And it's definitely an interesting trip to everybody gets to that spot. So I'm going to ask the same question to Elena. How did you get into, I mean, you went from the Department of State and now you're here. What drove you to that direction?
Well, I was very lucky in that my office at the Department of State is a public-private partnership. And so when I decided it was time to move on, actually it was a colleague of mine who called me from United and she said, I'm leaving and I think you should take my job. And it was a very seamless transition. And I know you don't get that often. But anyway, yeah, I mean, it's been a really fantastic turn of events for me. I've been very, very lucky. As far as coming to baseball specifically, a couple of things were attractive about this position. One is that ultimately I do want to be a chief security officer, and I've done travel security and I've done geopolitical intelligence, but the physical security parameters that's very new to me. My role here is probably a little bit different than what Rob and Blake have under their portfolio, in that I'm very employee focused, and so I'm really here to assist the actual employees of MLB, not so much the clubs. I don't really touch the clubs in that space. So it's pretty cut and dry, and it may sound boring, but I actually enjoy it. But making sure that our fire extinguishers are compliant and the AED machines are up to code and things like that. Creating a workplace violence prevention program, crisis management team, et cetera. That said, I do touch the clubs when it comes to threat management, and I do assist on the larger events like the All-Star Game, like the World Series. So in a way, it's kind of the best of both worlds, because I really get that breadth of experience, which is very exciting. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
Absolutely. And Blake, same question goes to you.
So I was actually really lucky when I was fresh out of high school. A good friend of mine by the name of Rick Rentz used to run a company called Concert Services Incorporated out of Connecticut. And I always wanted to be involved in the security industry just because I like helping people. I like to get the feedback of people feeling good about something, a situation that they came across. And I went to Rick and I told him, listen, I'd really like to kind of learn what it is that your book of business is and how you operate. And he was very well respected in the entertainment industry. He actually used to do a lot of security for the Charlie Daniels band. So he brought me on board to kind of intern as a security representative for his company. And unfortunately, it was only 7 months into the internship and Rick passed away.
Oh.
And his wife was kind of leaving the business up to all of the managers that he put in place. And because of that, I was looked at as the golden child, because Rick brought me on board and was like, this is our intern. He's going to be the guy that's going to help out with anything that I'm doing. So all of his managers had a lot of respect for him. And since he brought me on board, they had a lot of respect for me to kind of win Rick over. So from that point on, I started doing a lot more with the concerts and entertainment industry, where they were actually leaving me in charge of specific areas within events, and kind of grew from there. And I was still young and I wanted to get a little bit more hands-on, and I definitely had that kind of itch from a law enforcement perspective. So my uncle, who was in the FBI, actually told me I should go into the Coast Guard because they have a law enforcement branch within the Coast Guard. And that's what I ended up doing. I ended up getting on board with PAC TACLET out of San Diego. And I did that for a number of years. And I missed the industry. I missed the entertainment side of it. I missed the events. And once I was done with my enlistment, I decided to get back into the entertainment industry.
That's great. And Coast Guard, and also Army, you guys both, thank you for your service. It's a great veterans panel here today. So 2020 brought unique challenges to global security teams across the world, and it's cascaded into 2021. And we've seen some, a couple just in the last few weeks of some serious security issues that occurred. But what new security challenges have you faced in the past year? And we'll just start with Rob and then go around the panel.
So, as you have mentioned, 2020 did bring some unique challenges to the league's doorstep. And we've definitely seen that kind of spill over into 2021. I think more specifically, now that we have fans back in the stands, folks are, there's a little bit more anxiety in the stands, and fans have been a little bit unruly. So we've had more incidents, there's been like public field incursions that folks have seen. There's been it's a more dynamic environment where protests and issues, and it could be any geopolitical issue that's going on out there, could directly impact the ability for teams to make it to the stadium, could impact the safety and security of our events. And then you have an always dynamic COVID environment that we have to take into consideration, and all of the restrictions and regulations, and particularly when we're planning big events like Super Bowl, all that stuff matters. So, from our GSOC, not only has it heightened our value, but it also has heightened our risk portfolio as well. And with us on the other side of 2020, the league has wanted to do more things internationally, which then from a threat perspective just adds more things that you have to consider and weigh to the plate.
Okay. So I know in preparing for this, I was thinking to myself, how exactly has 2021 really been any different from 2020? And it has, but I don't think you can divorce this year from last year at all. As Rob said, it all kind of bled together. And I was jotting down all of our decision points from the start of the pandemic until where we are right now. So first, it was the decision to cancel spring training. And I think I wasn't privy to those discussions, but I suspect it was somewhat black and white, because by the time we canceled spring training, NBA had already canceled its season, NCAA had determined March Madness wasn't going to go on. So there wasn't a whole lot of, do we do this, do we not? It was kind of like, okay, this is over. That said, then we made the decision to delay the start of the season. All right, a little bit more nuanced. Then the decision to begin the season in all of our home clubs, with the exception of Toronto. And there was a lot of back and forth with that. There had been thought of corralling our teams into Arizona and Florida because they were the more permissive environments. And then all of a sudden, as we got a lot closer, it was like, no, wait a minute. If we work with state and local government, perhaps we can actually pull this off and have our teams in their home stadiums. So that was a big decision point. And of course, no fans at that time.
Right.
Then we made the decision to host the World Series in a bubble. And again, drawing on lessons learned from the NBA, I think we were very lucky in that we were able to see what our peer organizations had done successfully and determine, did that work for us and in what measures. 2021, we did have spring training on time, of course, with no fans or very few. We did begin the season on time. And it's just interesting to think that in April, when we started this season, we had no fans in our stadiums. And by the time we ended at the World Series, it was 100% capacity, which is kind of remarkable. And again, that was all done in consult with the best guidance that we were given, read the coronavirus, how it spread, mitigation, measures, et cetera. To Rob's point, though, yes, absolutely, unruly behavior. And you're seeing that industry wide. You're always seeing reports of flight attendants being knocked around on their, flights, restaurant owners, those who are responsible for asking for COVID vaccinations, especially here in New York City, just really bearing the brunt of just unbelievable pent up anger, I think. And yeah, I don't know how else to. If I think about it too much, I got upset, but nonetheless, also saw field intrusions. We also saw flag droppers, political, group of guys, really primarily guys, some ladies, some women as well, but going around from the parks and dropping these flags. And, that interferes with the fan experience. It could potentially cover a sponsor, and that's no good for anyone. So, and then determining how far do we push on reprimanding them? Do we ban them? We had to make some really deliberate decisions. And in some points, we knew they wanted the notoriety. They wanted that letter that they could then post on Twitter. Oh, isn't, MLB terrible? MLB so woke,
Right.
blah, blah, blah. And so some of them, we just kind of let them do their thing because we knew that they would very quickly be seen and could roll up the flag and get banned from the park. So yeah, a lot. I think in some ways, COVID brought to light obviously very new challenges, and in other ways it really just highlighted what had been existing that perhaps we weren't seeing.
And Blake, I mean, you're part of opening of a brand new stadium during this time too. I mean, what were the challenges that you faced?
We got lucky during COVID as far as the opening of the building. I think the hardest part of what we had was the logistics behind how do we meet the standards that the NFL is putting out with the resources that we have. But because we didn't have to put people in the building, we didn't need the large amount of resources that you would normally need for an NFL game. So we got lucky in that context. And it was quite different than when I I left SoFi and I came out here to Utah, where we were putting people in the building and we were trying to follow the NBA protocols, and we needed those resources that no one had. The Salt Lake City Police Department is down quite a few officers from quite a different reasons, from the different movements that are happening, from the COVID vaccination mandates to just not having enough people to hire. And it's something that we're feeling now, even in the private side with our staff. I mean, I'm close to 250 employees down from where I should be from a staffing standpoint, which is ginormous. And for me, it's trying to figure out, how do I logistically get done what I need to get done in a safe manner without having the resources that are normally necessary, or what was been the standard for the industry for so many years before COVID even hit. And then to go along off of what Rob was saying about the unruly fans, now picture not having the correct resources from a law enforcement and staffing standpoint, and then you hit the unruly fans that are coming in that have been in a house for a year plus and have all that aggression that they need to get out, and they just so happen to take it out on everybody except themselves. So for us, it's dealing with those groups. And because of the different movements that were happening, and there's the whole thought process behind the authority, and that police don't really have the authorities that they've had in the past to be able to address certain situations. One, because of different climates that there are, and two, because of COVID, and they don't want to actually process people and bring them to booking and put them in a cell because of COVID. So there's a lot of different pieces that people realize that, well, if I did this 2 years ago, I'd be getting booked and I'd be going down to a jail cell. Well, now I'm not going to get in trouble. They're going to tell me not to do that again and send me on my way. And they know that, and it empowers them to do more than what they would normally do in that setting. And those are the things that we're dealing with now within our arena, and even in other venues that we're operating out here in Utah. And I'm sure it's the same across the country, where that authoritativeness doesn't exist. So there's no fear of consequence, which means they're empowered to do more. Those are the difficult times that we're dealing with right now. And those are the things that are kind of the focus as to, well, how do we change that? Or how do we address that situation? And it's difficult to do in our climate.
You know, I want to stick on the reopening of the stadiums, if you will. Kind of hindsight being 2020, is there any advice that you would have given the stadiums before reopening that you learned from that start?
You know, I'm sure both Blake and Rob, you probably have had different moments where you thought you were going to be back to work 100%, and then that got dialed back. And so for example, our home office, our headquarters, it's been in various stages of opening and reopening and closing since June of 2020. Technically, we came back in June. Very few people were here. I mean, it was a skeleton crew. And the guidance last November was that we were going to reopen. Employees were welcome to come back, and very shortly after, they just completely closed it down again. And then, in fact, this past leading into the summertime, same thing. After the All-Star game, the expectation was everybody's on site 5 days a week, 9 to 5. And then quickly, once Delta took over, it was no. Now the expectation is 3 days a week here minimum, and then you can work from home. So to your question about the park, I guess and again, hindsight being 2020, I think. Right. Just having that flexibility, and so being prepared for all eventualities. So maybe better communicating expectations among the vendors and what that level of preparedness is, and then understanding that whatever plans you had in place might need to be completely changed. And so it's possible, Todd, that when you attended that game, that there were that they were following what was expected, and then and then certain elements creeped up. Perhaps there were more people on site that they had budgeted for, or perhaps, I don't know, maybe the health inspector came through and said no, there needs to be more more space among your crowds in line, et cetera. So again, I think and really I think that speaks to just the entire atmosphere of 2020 until now, and going into 2022 is flexibility and the need to be prepared for what you really can't prepare for. Easy task.
Right. Yeah, right. Like you had some.
Yeah. So I was lucky in the sense of I got to experience two different things. I got to experience the brand new opening of a football stadium, and I also got to experience the reopening of NBA arena during the pandemic. So I got to take away two different things from the two different groups. One, from the opening of the football stadium. Anyone that's opened a building before knows that you can plan as much as you want until you go through the nuances of actually running people through that building. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be things that happen. It's just, how do you not compound those mistakes off of your own mistakes? So looking back on it, it's really the trial and error and paying attention to kind of what it is that you have in place and what are the logistic nightmares that you're going to be dealing with. And I got lucky. There was a gentleman there at SoFi Stadium that was really big on putting your doomsday list together of what it is that you're going to have to address at a high level. Like, what is your worst case scenario? So doing that kind of helped us plan and put in process what that would be and how are we going to respond to that. The other side to it is the NBA arena side, where the thing that I noticed the most, and it's something that I think just happens in the industry in general, is the training portion of it. So we come into a pandemic and we start bringing people into the building where the NBA is operating the building and giving us these standards. And we just automatically assume that the staff that have been here the years before know what the operation is. And we bring them into the building and then we realize, well, one, half of our staff is new because we needed to hire new people because a lot of them left. Or two, the people that have been here before don't understand the protocols, don't understand the things that are in place. And it's not the same operation. It's not the same path of travel for guests. It's not the same path of travel for players. It's not the same path of travel for our employees. So going through and doing that retraining and actually the new training for what it is that they're going to have to accomplish during the year, I think that is the biggest piece as far as looking back on it, is we needed to invest more time into the training of our staff walking into this pandemic season to really have a good understanding of what that look is going to be, because ultimately, I mean, it was brand new to everybody.
Right. So stay on the same topic, given the dynamic environment, how has that impacted the relationship with vendors that make up your capability stack? Robert, we'll start with you.
Bottom line, the pandemic made those relationships essential, period. They had to be a partnership. You have to have those continual dialogue. I know a lot of our vendor partners were the reason our GSOC was successful, both during 2020, and that relationship has continued to grow and thrive in 2021. I think that continual engagement has been key because the world has shifted so much and has also forced us to ensure that our capability stack is agile and dynamic. It's a big reason why we end up changing out like our emergency notification system. That's why we use Titan HST, because it's agile for our employees. We had to change some of our other tool sets to make sure it was agile and could actually pivot to any of the new random things that could be going on that impacts us from a risk side. So for me, those relationships are essential, but it's truly a relationship. It cannot be just a purchase off the shelf. You have to have continual discussions about requirements and really make sure that, from the partnership side, everything's hitting the mark.
And thank you, Rob. Thanks. And then Elena, same question.
Yeah, I think that from what I overheard with my colleagues who were more involved with the vendors that manage the clubs, I think so many vendors were really great in pivoting to new use cases. And so perhaps services that they hadn't been able to provide in the past, or they had, but they were able to repackage those and provide them in a way to help manage COVID, I thought was extremely useful. I think, again, COVID really, I think it brought to light perhaps the vendors and the tools that you weren't really using, and you were able to discard of those. And then it also brought to light where your gaps were, and then you were able to find new partners and new sources. And yeah, I would say that also one thing I found that was particularly useful with vendors is finding out what their other clients were doing. Because I think oftentimes, especially in a crisis, you may think of a vendor as providing a certain service and not considering and not able to brainstorm like, well, what else could they be doing and what other direction can I take them? And when a vendor proactively comes to you and says, well, hey, such and such client not even having to name it, but perhaps another client in an industry similar to yours, or another client with an employee population that is somewhat hybrid at this moment, they're using us to do X, Y, Z. I think that's so vital and so useful. And as Rob said, it's because you have that established relationship that you trust the vendor trusts you, the vendor kind of knows your needs and can speak to, hey, why don't you think about using us in this other way, or adding on and picking up something else that we can provide.
I think that's a critical step right there, is having that relationship with the vendors is important. Blake, what about you? What do you think?
So from a facility operations side, it was hit and miss from a vendor standpoint as far as the relationships and how they operated. The hit was the fact that we had some vendors that would over communicate to us their needs and things that needed to happen for them to be able to provide the service that we're paying them for. For example, the process of bringing goods in for our suites and for our premium spaces, we needed to have all of our vendors actually go through a process of a health questionnaire coming into the building. So again, we looked at another vendor of ours, which is Titan HST, as far as doing the health questionnaire, the green or red screen coming in. So having the vendors on board to give us their employee information to be able to push out those health questionnaires was huge. And we had quite a few vendors that were on board with that. And then we had quite a few vendors that didn't want to actually partake in that. Well, unfortunately, that was something that was being pushed down by the NBA. So there was certain groups that weren't capable of coming in and working in this environment. The misses were really the logistic nightmares that we ended up having to go through with those vendors. So if we had meal preps or food preps in our premium spaces that needed to get done, if it wasn't specifically our in-house catering, there was certain things that needed to have happen in certain spaces, but because of the NBA season, we had green, red, and yellow zones that people can operate in. The logistics and the layout of our building didn't accommodate the needs of the vendor as far as being able to provide that service the way that they used to in the past. So we used to have this past year vendors that would actually prepare their food outside of the building and bring it in because they couldn't prepare it in the space that they would normally have to prepare it in. So there was a lot of logistic nightmares that came with it. And like I said, some of the vendors were on board and were very much happy to be a part of the evolution that we call COVID. But then we had some of them that were just like, listen, I don't want to put the time and effort into what it's going to take for us to provide what it is that you're asking for. So they just cut ties and went on their way.
So when you're assessing those capabilities of the vendors, what is important to you? And then on the other side of that, how important is it for those capabilities to be able to work together and integrate? And we'll start with Elena.
Yeah, as far as what I'm looking for in a vendor when I'm evaluating a tool, absolutely, it has to be able to speak to our existing tools. And so, so in total candor, we're in the process now of onboarding Titan HST. We're not yet fully activated, but we made sure that Titan integrated with our existing HR software, an app that we use for our major events, et cetera. And so that's really vital because you want to be able to have that communication flow. And then, yeah, certainly I think when you're evaluating the vendor, you have to be comfortable and confident that they understand your needs. And I think that to me, and especially my experience in baseball, sometimes some vendors, they want to deliver the world, and you don't necessarily need the world. You're hiring them for one particular use case, perhaps two particular use cases, and everything else is just not necessary. And so to be able to corral the vendor and say like, hey, this is what we're emphasizing right now, and maybe we can consider this down the road, but right now, this is what we actually need, I think is important. So yeah, I would say again, like integration with what you already have, whether it's other vendor tools or just a good cultural fit, perhaps with your organization, something that your employees are actually going to use. I think, like, to me, the Titan interface or user face rather on the app, to me, it's very friendly looking. I like the color scheme, things like that. I knew that in the past, I have heard this anecdotally, that we had some similar apps that employees were a little bit loath to use. And I think that with the Titan look and feel, it's a little bit more baseball-y. I think that, we're going to get more employee buy-in, which is vital. And then really being very deliberate and crystal clear in exactly what you need from them and what you can discard of at that moment.
For me, my expectations are, they really have to, like what Elena said, they have to align with your mission, and definitely the culture and what you're trying to do. One of the things that's been essential for me is really building out roadmaps, and making sure that we're kind of growing these capability stacks together. And unfortunately, some vendors evolution passes them by, and it is what it is, and you reach a glass ceiling,
Yeah.
and you actually recognize, like, okay, we can't continue with this relationship because you're not capable of moving forward with us. We had, to Elena's part, we had an emergency notification system we had for several years, but unfortunately, our employees had no idea what was going on with it. It was barely adopted. It was more seen as a nuisance than anything else. So when we, came across Titan HST, what's been remarkable for us is that our employees are actually leveraging it, and now it's becoming an essential piece of our business continuity, all of our emergency preparedness plans, what have you. And when it comes to integrations, one of the things that we've been trying to do is get all of our tools to talk to each other. And the bottom line is, when we have a limited staff and a GSOC and 1,000 different things to look at and address. So the more that those capabilities talk to each other in a way that's understandable, it's easier for us then to build our business processes around that, and ensure that we're effective no matter what's coming in. So we've been tying a lot to our emergency management system, or our incident management system. We've been tying a lot to our VCC software. Again, just having small amounts of places for our employees to have to look at, so we're able to quickly respond, as opposed to looking at 1,000 different things and being incredibly ineffective.
And Blake, what do you think?
When I'm looking at the vendors, the two biggest things that I look at is the responsiveness and the willingness to go that extra mile. So to kind of touch on what Elena was saying, where we do get a lot of vendors that will come in and try to give you 9 million things when you only need one. And for me, it's looking at it and saying, how well do you perform that one, and how much do you go above and beyond with that one piece that we're looking to get out of you? And then when that one thing doesn't operate to the level that we need to operate, or there's something that we need to change on it, what's your responsiveness to either making a change or bringing that extra element to make sure that your client, us, are good with what it is that you're providing? So I think those two things are huge with vendors nowadays. And I think the biggest thing that we run into in the industry is that there's a lot of people that have been, or a lot of companies that have been in the industry for so long, and they've kind of cemented this foundation, and they have this cookie cutter mentality of, well, we've been here so long, we know what you need, here it is, this is what you get, and good luck with it. And I think that's what's kind of separated a lot of the companies that are coming up now and are making some ground and kind of making a name for themselves, is that their responsiveness is because they're eager and they want to get involved in those different markets, and their willingness to make change and to alter on the fly. And I think that is what kind of wins people over, is the understanding that you're willing to do those things with your product. So I think those are the two big things when it comes to addressing vendors.
So we're looking at 2022. It's right in the corner. Oh my gosh, it's only like 30 days away. So what do you think security leaders should be considering, ensuring that their teams and their fans and everybody's ready to address the challenges? And I want to tweak this question just a little bit here, because of the last couple of weeks, we've seen some tragedies when it came to security breakdowns at events. And what can people do, if you guys can give some advice to our colleagues out there planning for larger events, to ensure the fan experience, the safety of the staff, the safety of the participants on the field, or in some cases the concerts? What are those challenges that are out there, and what advice can you give? And we'll start with Rob.
I know for us, our events are becoming increasingly more dynamic, and particularly on the other side of 2020, I know we're looking for new opportunities to engage different fan bases, and that could be either online or in person, which again, expands the kind of the risk profile. When I look at some of the more recent incidents, I think oftentimes there's a breakdown in communication, and I think The other aspect is really making sure that your continuity plans, your emergency preparedness plans, and any plan that you have going forward actually has a deliberate security plan attached to all of that, and that's communicated clearly, and that everyone's on the same page. A lot of the breakdowns that I've kind of looked at with some of these events really is that folks were not well trained. They did not actually have good, clean protocols in place on what they're supposed to do when an incident occurred. And once it starts breaking down from initial contact, unless there's a plan for the second, third order effects, if you have a contingency plan for the contingency plan, then everything else breaks down, and then your reputation as an organization also falls apart as well. Because at the end of the day, that fan experience is literally from that person standing in line all the way through, from getting screened to sitting in their seat to going to concession stand to using the restroom. Every single aspect of that, either enhances or lowers the risk, and enhances or lowers your reputation. And the unfortunate thing that we're seeing now is that with the staffing shortages at a lot of our venues, when fights do happen, there's a slower response time, if at all, sometimes, and then folks post out on Twitter and it becomes viral. And then once it becomes viral, that is the reputation for that location. And where families are considering taking their loved ones out to an event, now they're considering the last fight that they saw online that happened at your venue. So that the ability to even with their staffing shortages, communication has to be clear, it has to be deliberate, and you have to have practice plans. And it cannot be just, oh, we made an ops plan and these are all the things everyone's going to do, here's our contact numbers. No, you have to test that. You have to really test it and be prepared for the worst case scenario, so you're always at your best.
Absolutely. I'll tell you one thing, and when it comes to the fan experience specifically, where my experience is there, is that I do feel that very safe in the stadium, and so much so that when I send my kids to the game, my older children, they can go by themselves without having, he's 18, without having any concern about like whether they're going to be, in trouble or anything like this. And it seems to be a safe place for people to go. So hats off to you all for doing that. I think it's really a testament to what you guys are doing. There is a question here that came in. It says, I'm curious if your respective fields, they've received a direct feedback from your fans on what concerns, needs, hopes are for the future seasons going into the stadiums. And if so, can you share a few? We'll start with Blake with that.
Yeah, so we do surveys every game, every event. I mean, surveys are the way of the world now to get an understanding of how people feel. We have email lines on our website for comments from people. The concerns, it's kind of 50-50 right now. It's interesting. Because we're open, we're at full capacity. You don't need to wear a mask in our building. We have the individuals that are complaining about people not wearing masks around them when they sneeze. We're getting people that complain that someone's clearing their throat and they must be sick and they shouldn't be sitting next to them. But then we also get people from a political standpoint, different shirts that people are wearing that say different things on them, going back and forth. It's funny that the focus is more self than it is the mass. So everybody that's coming in that has a feeling about what the next couple seasons are coming up and how they feel and everything, they're not looking at it from coming into the building like, oh, I don't feel safe, or the event operation is not safe. It's, well, I don't like this or I don't like that. It's very much them specific, because I feel like in the last 2 years, that's all it's been. It's about them specific when they've been locked in their homes and they've been dealing with the different things that they're dealing with. So when they come out and now they're in masses, it's hard to explain to somebody that, listen, you decide to come to a building that has 20,000 people in it. That's your choice. You don't have to come to that building and put yourself in an environment where you feel uncomfortable because of the pandemic that's going on or because of the different things that are happening. Those are choices that you're making. So to to look at the venue operators and to look at the different leagues and say, well, you're not making it safe for us in those environments. We're doing what we can legally do to protect you in the manner that is out there as far as legal and legitimate for us to protect you from a health standpoint, from a safety and security standpoint. We're doing all we can do. It's then up to you as an individual to decide whether or not you want to subject yourself to that and something else can go wrong within that setting. I mean, it's just the way of the world that it is right now. I mean, people have feelings across both sides of the venue space. So it's, for me, it's really a juggling match. It's a juggling match to make sure that we're making all of our fans happy, but also not inconveniencing them with the different standards and things that are in place. So it definitely is, it's a new way of the world that we're trying to deal with right now. And the biggest thing that we're dealing with, vaccination cards.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm sure everybody loves this topic, but I can tell you the amount of times I've been yelled at about their vaccination card not being checked correctly. And I try to explain to people, I don't have a database that goes across the country that can verify that your vaccination card is a legitimate vaccination card. We're leaving it on the public to operate with integrity and bring a vaccination card that is their legitimate vaccination card to our venue. I can't sit there and scroll through everybody's databases to figure out if it was a legit vaccination card. So it puts us in a awkward position as far as addressing that and communicating that to all the people that are coming into our facility.
Elena, same question to you.
Similar to what Blake said, I know the fan experience is top of mind for MLB and engaging with the fans. And so I believe they're also surveyed to death after, having attended an event. And I know a lot of that is also via the apps. And so I think the Ballpark app is the big one that we use. I don't know. I don't see the results. I don't know what exactly is top of mind. I suspect we're probably getting the same complaints and concerns. But, for the moment of levity, we had to remove a gentleman at the one of the World Series games because he wore a gigantic sombrero and refused to take his sombrero off. And so he was affecting the fan experience. People couldn't see, around him, and he stuck to it. He wore that sombrero as he was marched out of the ballpark. So some of it, it doesn't necessarily have to be political. It can just be, will and refusing really to abide by the rules. So yeah, I guess it probably just runs the gamut. But yeah, it's absolutely top of mind. And unfortunately, I don't really know what the complaints are, but I have a feeling.
This kind of goes back into the thing, and the sombrero story is awesome, by the way. When we have events, we have an emergencies specifically at venues or whatever. For instance, like the earthquake that was on TV or things like this. We go to these, well, what if, and then it kind of goes this idea, well, it won't happen here or it won't happen again or this type of stuff. How do you break that when you're talking to those? This comes from a question from one of the users. How do you break that path of your staff or even your C-suite saying, hey, it's not going to happen again, or we're not worried about this? Like, what do you use to kind of move that down the pipeline? We'll start with Robert.
I will say that does not seem to exist at this point. That might have been a thought process prior to 2020, but post 2020, if nothing else, those kind of things are top of mind. In fact, we get requested to do after action reviews of any of those kind of incidents and kind of brief them out to not only our security department, but at times to our event planners, just so those kind of mistakes don't get made. So like even when we're prepping for Super Bowl, anything that we're seeing that goes on globally, it actually gets briefed out once a week to our executives on anything that's happening, whether it's unruly incidents, whether it's a disaster or anything along those lines. And we really look at, okay, what was the breakdown? What are things that could have been done better? We take a hard look at our emergency preparedness plans and make sure we're accounting for stuff like that, or even just asking ourselves a question like, do we have a plan if something like this would occur? I will say that the conversations now, at least what I've witnessed inside the league, are far more mature in that space coming out of 2020. 2020 than I recall prior to that, just because now it's no longer like, oh, that's the world outside my window. That is the world that actually can shut down your window
Right.
and your front door and potentially cost you, revenue, your reputation, all of that stuff. And no one wants to have that black eye and that black mark on any of the events that we host. So I can tell you with the larger events that we're having, the intricacies and the planning and the thought behind it is constantly evolving, and is literally evolving in real time as we learn from unfortunate incidents that are happening around the world.
Blake, same question.
So for me, with ours, it's funny. There's two parts to this: our C-suite and then our line staff. And I actually use the same approach for both, because in all honesty, they're both operating with the same mindset of this will never happen here. And I've always give this speech to my staff whenever we hold trainings, and that is, if somebody wants to come in and do something harmful to our venue, they 100% are going to do it. And the only thing that we can say is that we are prepared to take on whatever it is that individual tries to do, and our response is what makes us better than everybody else. So telling people that, it kind of scares them a little bit with, wow, like, what do you mean? We hired you so that way nothing ever happens at your building. Well, nobody's Superman. Nobody can stop somebody that's put in the effort and taken the time to plan something adverse at your facilities or at your events. It's how you respond to those things. So when I go through and I give those trainings to C-suite and to our line staff, and I go through, these are the things that we need to know. These are the things that need to be in place from a policy and procedure standpoint. And they need to understand it and know it at a high level, because when those things are happening, those individuals are going to be directly involved with the business continuity and with the response to the media and the response to law enforcement coming to address whatever it is that they need to address. So I use kind of a scare tactic to get them to understand, like, we're not blind to this. We don't have a force field around us that's going to stop this from happening. So we need to make sure that we're operating at a high level to be able to address those things when they do occur. And then I go through and I educate them about the different things that are happening in our environment. So I go through and I'll give them statistics about everything from vehicle thefts to assaults to felonies around the area. I go through and I run the gamut for them to get them to understand that the world isn't this rainbows and butterflies outside of this building. Like, that's not the way that this world operates. And I feel like a lot of people feel like that. They feel like because I get to drive to work and I get to get out of my car safely and I get to walk in, that everything's okay. And I mean, anyone that really pays attention to the news and understands workplace violence at the level that it's at, I mean, that's not a realistic thing. So for us to kind of let our guard down, it's a constant reminder to our C-suite and to our line staff, like, those people exist that are looking to do harm. And we need to make sure that we're on our game every single day, even on off days. Days like today, where I'm sitting in the arena and we don't have an event going on, this is actually the most vulnerable day, because people can sneak in here and you don't think anything of it. It's just vendors that are here loading in or doing something on their own. These are the days that we really need to pay attention. And this is where it becomes more lax. Right. So constantly educating them and getting them to understand that the world isn't that safe place that everybody makes it out to be, and they need to be on their P's and Q's when it comes to how we address the things that come up.
Elena, same question to you.
Yeah, I think storytelling is vital. And, to Blake's point, whether it's scare tactics or just showing an incident that happened somewhere and relating it and saying, well, this is how it could happen to MLB. There was a series of twin bombings of, I think it was the JW Marriott and the Ritz-Carlton in Jakarta. This was years ago. And the takeaway that I had was that, I believe it was the Marriott one, the bomber got in because he was a floral delivery guy. He brought in the flowers and nobody looked at him twice. He just went through security, got in, with his flowers. And the reason that I think this is a really good example to highlight is that, am I concerned that there's going to be a floral delivery at a baseball game? Probably not. But do we have contractors, as what Blake was saying. Do we have contractors who are coming through? Have they been properly vetted? Have they been properly background investigated? Is there a continual background investigation? Perhaps they've become vulnerable to some sort of outside influence. So that's the type of story that I would tell. And so, you hear about a hotel attack and you don't necessarily think that there's any real corollary to a baseball game. And yet the fundamental threat is the same.
Absolutely. Okay, we got a question about COVID or a similar pandemic. If it happens again, are we still in the case of responding as issues arise? And do you think the changes being implemented in this period will be long lasting, or are they specific to this period of time? I have an opinion on that one, but well, Rob, we'll start with you.
I will definitely say there's going to be long-lasting impacts. I know it's already rolled into our protocols this year. There's a lot of lessons learned that we learned during the pandemic or during 2020, as we're still technically within the pandemic period. That I think from a health and safety perspective is going to be incorporated from now on, and probably for as long as folks can think about the game. I almost compare this to the changes that were made after 9/11, when it came to screening and whatnot. I think this is very much that, but from a health perspective, and there's going to be a lot of other contingencies both at our facilities but also at our stadiums and our events that will always be part of that consideration. And whether or not it's how front facing it is, I think is going to depend on what type of service we're providing. But I think like touchless payments and different ways in which we engage fans are changed forever, without question.
Right. Elena, you as well.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think I used to say that in our field, if you had any inkling towards cybersecurity, that you had job security for life. And I still believe that. But now I have an addendum, and now I'm saying, yeah, and if you've been formally trained in crisis management and in business continuity, you've got job stability for life. I think this is going to have, as Rob said, very long lasting effects. So yes, absolutely.
Play, gotta take it.
I don't even know what to say. I got to be honest. Rob stole my line, because I literally tell everybody this when they ask me about COVID. They always go into, well, the vax check and the screening process and the health questionnaire. And I said, everybody complained when we put magnetometers in buildings, and you got to hear it for a period of time where they were just so upset that they had to get screened coming into a building. And now here we are, where now from a health standpoint, we're doing vax checks and we're doing health questionnaires and we're doing testing. And it's going to be one of those things where this next year and a half, people are going to complain about it. And then it's just going to become the norm. And it's going to eventually just write into our policies and procedures that the norm is, this is what we're doing. And then people are going to forget about it. Then they're going to be doing it second nature, not even thinking about it. But we're at that point right now, the same point that we were after 9/11, when they started doing the whole mags and DHS really got their hands involved with the events. We're at that point right now where it's just everyone feels a certain way about it and they're complaining about it. And when they realize that all the stress and angst that they put into complaining about it, if they just used it towards just doing the process, it'd be a lot easier and they'd come in a lot happier into the events. We'll be good. And I think that's about a year down the road.
Well, I mean, the fans got smarter, right, about going through the bag checks and stuff. I mean, especially with the NFL, with the clear bag requirement and things like that. I mean, you can see people getting through the checks like this now compared before when they had all their bags and they pull everything out. Everybody's like, okay, screw it, we're not going to bring my bag with me, and I get through the check really quick. It's the one last question here when it comes into this. Do you think that COVID has created, and we're getting here close to the end here, do you think that COVID has created a positive opportunity for technology growth or adaptation to the venues? Just all around, yes. Okay, let's start with Elena.
I do. I don't know how else to, I can't really elaborate. I absolutely do, because I think that I was just thinking about this at an earlier point in the webinar, just that the opportunities for innovation that came up during COVID and now its aftermath, I think are really limitless. There's a lot that can be done that COVID kind of brought on. Not that that's a positive spin. I don't ever want to positively spin COVID, but that is.
Can you positively spin COVID? Yes. Okay. That's awesome. All right, Blake.
Yeah, I think what it did is obviously with the lessening of staff, it kind of made it a point to see what technologies that we can put into place that can help kind of offset the fact that we don't have as much staff. So when you start looking at the different mag companies and the different products that they've put into place to be able to address the number of people and the throughput through screening processes, the emergency notification, the mass notification, the incident reporting, and how all of that ties into kind of one big hub, and how by having those things at your fingertips and being able to operate them, it lessens the amount of people and the burden that you have from a physical standpoint to address a lot of the situations. So the technology really has flourished in this environment because now there's a lot more integrating going on than there was in the last 2, 3, 4 years before that. Now, all of a sudden, all the different technology companies are like, yeah, you know what? We should be looking to integrate because it's only going to benefit us as a company, because now we're going to get our hands in with other businesses that we would normally not have. But because we're willing to integrate and kind of grow within this environment that we're in today, it's opening up business opportunities. So I think COVID has really kind of forced the hand of a lot of the different tech companies to say, you know what, we should open ourselves up. We shouldn't be just so this is our box and this is where we're going to stay. It should be very much so where we're trying to implement and incorporate as many different products as we can into one.
All right, we have a couple minutes left, and I just want to go really quick. Rob, I'm going to go around the horn. Robert, what keeps you up at night?
Everything. I mean, you know, the thing that keeps me up at night, you know, is an incident that our GSOC's not prepared for. You know, and, you know, throughout all of last year, there was a lot of things that came to bear that tested our resiliency, tested our tools, our technology, and our training. But there's also things that are likely on the horizon that we're not thinking about right now. So that's what keeps me up at night. You know, I think about that all the time. You know, what is out on the horizon, on that edge that could impact us that we're not planning for. And that's what it is for me.
Elena.
Workplace violence, domestic terrorism, and the combination of misinformation and disinformation.
Yeah, that's key. Blake.
Well, besides my 2 kids, they've pretty much touched on everything. It's really just receiving the phone call that you never want to receive,
Right.
Whether you're here or not. Getting that phone call saying that something happened, and understanding the severity behind what that phone call means, and kind of how we address it, and how I'm comfortable with myself as far as dealing with an event, but I never feel comfortable having to have the conversation with staff and other people in my workplace to address certain adverse situations that could occur. So I think that's what keeps me up at night is really the fear of having to have those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, everybody, thank you so much for spending time with us today. It's been a great conversation. I really do appreciate everything that you guys do, and keeping all of us safe and happy when we're doing the fan experience, when we go to our venues, especially the sports stuff today. And hey, everybody else, thank you for joining us, being as a participant and joining here on this conversation. And for those that weren't able to be here today and are watching the review, please feel free to reach out to us and contact us at Titan HST. You can check us out at titanhst.com or send an email to info@titanhst.com or support@titanhst.com. And we'll be able to get back to you in that way. Everybody else, thank you again for your time, and love to do this again sometime.